We need to have a hard conversation today. Usually, when we talk about why people are broke, we talk about the math. We talk about inflation, stagnant wages, or the cost of housing. And those are real. They are valid. But there is a deeper layer that almost nobody talks about. It's not about what is in your wallet. It is about what is happening in your brain. Psychologists have identified a set of specific cognitive habits, ways of thinking, that are actually signs of lower intelligence. These aren't just quirks, they are mental wires that are crossed. When you apply these specific habits to your money, they create a trap that no amount of budgeting can fix. We call this financial magical thinking. Today, we're going to break down the non-financial habits that indicate poor financial intelligence. We're going to look at why relying on luck is destroying your future, why mental rigidity is keeping you poor, and how to rewire your brain to finally see the evidence that is right in front of you. Part 1. The curse of magical thinking. Let's start with a concept called magical thinking. According to psychology, this is when people believe that their internal thoughts or rituals can control external events that are actually random. You know the type. The person who has to wear their lucky socks to the exam to pass. The person who avoids stepping on cracks in the sidewalk because they think it brings bad luck. It seems harmless, right? It seems funny. But psychology tells us that this is actually a sign of low cognitive processing. Why? Because you are outsourcing your logic to superstition. You're confusing coincidence with cause. Now, apply this to your money. Financial magical thinking is when you ignore the math of your bank account because you secretly believe a big break is coming to save you. You see this in the person who is drowning in credit card debt but refuses to cut their spending because they're convinced they're going to get that big promotion next month. Or the person who thinks, I don't need to save for retirement. My business idea is going to take off and I'll be a millionaire. This is dangerous because it stops you from solving real problems. Real intelligence pauses and asks, where is the evidence? But the magical thinker skips that step. They build a financial strategy out of thin air. They rely on the universe to balance their checkbook. If you catch yourself saying, it'll all work out, but you have no plan for how it will work out, you are suffering from magical thinking. You are relying on a narrative of luck rather than the evidence of your habits. And the market doesn't care about your lucky socks. Part 2. The big break versus the evidence. This brings us to the second struggle, the inability to process evidence. There is a habit linked to lower intelligence where people choose dramatic stories over simple evidence. This is why conspiracy theories are so popular. They offer a simple, exciting explanation for complex problems. In finance, this manifests as the refusal to look at your spending. I know people who will spend hours researching a new cryptocurrency because it feels like a secret lottery ticket. It's exciting. It's a story. But that same person refuses to spend 10 minutes looking at their grocery spending or their car payment. Why? Because the car payment is boring and the evidence is painful. Let's look at the car payment trap. We see people driving $70,000 trucks while making $50,000 a year. When you ask them how they afford it, they don't give you math, they give you a story. I need it for safety. I need it for my image. I deserve this because I work hard. That is the story. But the evidence says you are paying $130,000 over 7 years for a depreciating asset that will leave you with nothing. The magical thinker chooses the story that makes them feel good. The financially intelligent person looks at the evidence, even if it hurts. They understand that a truck isn't a status symbol, it's a tool. And if the tool costs more than your future freedom, the math doesn't work. Part 3. Rigid thinking. Now we move to the most destructive habit of all, rigid thinking. Psychologists call this mental inflexibility. It is the refusal to adapt to new methods because that's not how we do things. You see this in people who reject new ideas, not because the ideas are wrong, but because they are different. In the financial world, rigid thinking is what keeps people poor for generations. It's the person who says, "My parents never invested in the stock market, so I won't either. It's gambling." It's the person who says, "I will never buy a used car. I only buy new because I need the warranty," even though the math proves that the used car is thousands of dollars cheaper, even with repairs. Rigid thinkers stay stuck because life punishes stuck. The economy changes, interest rates change, the job market changes. If you are operating with a financial rulebook from 1990, you are going to lose. Intelligent people adapt. When reality shifts, they shift. If inflation goes up, they don't just complain, they look for high-yield savings accounts. If car prices skyrocket, they don't just sign the loan, they fix their old car and keep driving it. Ask yourself, what financial belief are you holding on to just because it's comfortable? Are you refusing to budget because it's too hard? Are you refusing to learn about investing because it's for rich people? That is rigid thinking, and it is an anchor around your neck. Part 4. The Dunning-Kruger effect of finance. We have to talk about the loudest person in the room. You've likely heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's a psychological phenomenon where people who know the least about a topic think they know the most. True intelligence admits, "I don't know." Fake intelligence hides behind volume. We see this constantly in finance. It's the guy at the barbecue giving you stock tips who has zero savings. It's the person on social media telling you to leverage debt to buy real estate when they've never lived through a recession. This confidence without content is deadly. It leads you to take risks you don't understand. The person with high financial intelligence is usually the quietest one. They're the ones driving the Honda Accord, not the lifted truck. They're not trying to impress you with their knowledge. They're trying to learn. They ask questions. They read the fine print. They don't assume they know everything. Part 5. Instant gratification versus identity. Underpinning all of this is the ability to wait. You've heard of the marshmallow test. Kids who couldn't delay gratification struggled later in life with money, school, and health. Psychology shows that constant instant rewards, scrolling, snacking, swiping, train your brain to avoid effort. You're literally rewiring your brain to be impatient. In finance, this is the difference between being a consumer and being an investor. The consumer says, "I want the reward now." They buy the car, the clothes, the dinner. The investor says, "I will tolerate short-term discomfort for long-term gain." This is where the identity shift comes in. According to the source Nick Invests, saving your first $10,000 or $20,000 is brutal. It's like pushing a boulder up a hill. But the hardest part isn't the math, it's the identity. You have to stop identifying as a spender and start identifying as a saver. When you have $0 in the bank, you are in survival mode. Your brain is flooded with cortisol. You make bad, short-term decisions because you are biologically stressed. But when you delay gratification and build that $20,000 buffer, you exit survival mode. You stop sweating the small stuff. You stop outsourcing your logic to luck. You start planning. Part 6. The silent killer. Inability to be alone. There's one final habit from the simple mind map psychology that hits hard: the inability to sit with your own thoughts. Some people panic at silence. If there's no TV, no music, no scrolling, they feel lost. They constantly need distraction. Psychology says this signals a weak mental process. You are hiding from your own thoughts. How does this keep you poor? If you cannot sit in silence, you cannot reflect. You cannot plan. People often spend money just to avoid being bored or alone. We call it retail therapy, but it's really just distraction therapy. You buy things to fill the silence. You go out to expensive dinners because you don't want to sit at home with your own thoughts. Intelligent minds use solitude for problem solving. They sit down, look at the numbers, and strategize. The solution: rewiring the brain. So if you recognize yourself in any of this, if you've been relying on magical thinking or rigid habits or avoiding the evidence, what do? The good news is that your brain is plastic. You can rewire it, but you have to break the loop. Step 1. Demand evidence. Next time you want to make a purchase or a financial move, ask yourself, am I doing this because of a story I'm telling myself or because the evidence supports it? Stop believing in lucky socks. Look at the bank statement. Step 2. Embrace the empty cup mindset. There's a concept from Zen Buddhism called the empty cup mindset. You cannot pour tea into a cup that is already full. If you think you already know how money works, but you're broke, your cup is full of bad ideas. Empty it. Be humble. Admit you don't know, and start learning the basics of budgeting and investing. Step 3. Tolerate the discomfort. Stop looking for the big break. Stop trying to get rich quick.